Hi, everyone. My name is Faiza Arshad. I co-lead the Early Stage Researchers Working Group with Ross Williams, and we're really excited to have another career speaker event today, November 14th, and this time it's with Rupa Makadia. I'm going to introduce her, but before that, I just want to maybe summarize our working group again for individuals who are new and who might be interested in joining. So the goal and the purpose of our working group is to create an inviting venue for earlier stage researchers in the OHDSI community, people who are more junior in their career and who want mentorship and support. And hopefully this is going to be like a platform and a resource for everyone who has questions about their career trajectory and who just want to hear about other people's research and how they got to where they've gotten. So today we are really honored to invite Rupa Makadia. She's a director in the Observational Health Data Analytics at Johnson & Johnson. And she has 15 plus years in health informatics and epidemiology experience, 10 plus years at J&J. She has a PhD in biomedical informatics, a master's in biostatistics, and a bachelor's in biological sciences. And she has background working at large payer systems and pharma. She's been an OHDSI collaborator for a long time in working groups and network studies, and she's very experienced in so many of the topics that we discuss in OHDSI, including ETL, large data, characterizations, cohort studies, network studies, clinical trials, etc., and so much more. So thank you so much, Rupa, for joining us.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. So, I have been at OHDSI from the start. So, I want to describe a little bit about my background, what I did to get to where I am, and then I'm probably going to dive into more relevant topics for the group. Thinking about skills, what things have been important for me along the journey, a couple of other things that might be important for those that are just starting out to be aware of. And then I am happy to answer any questions along the way. So I guess I'll start all the way back from probably when I graduated undergrad. And it was in biology with I don't know what I want to do, but data sounds pretty cool. So actually was born and raised in the Bay Area in California. So surrounded by technology and data my whole life, but it wasn't into computer science or I'd say the more technical aspects of software development, and that was the world around me growing up. And then I thought about, thinking about where I wanted to go with data. So when I first started out, I worked for a large medcom companies in the Bay Area. So we supported all pharma around there, including Genentech and Amgen. And that's kind of where I first got really interested in thinking about clinical trials and thinking about this space in pharma. From there, I joined my master's program. So I was working and also going to school and started getting into biostats, thinking that that would be a great, sort of mosh into technology, stats programming, and then also thinking about clinical trials. Cohort studies and that whole aspect of epidemiology also was a part of the focus of the program. From there, I joined Kaiser Permanente for about 4 years. So that was my first real taste of big data. So lots of people know or don't know, Kaiser owns one of the largest closed networks healthcare systems. So you buy your insurance from them. You also have all of the data feeds come directly to you. So it's an integrated EHR claims system where I worked for program office, which is basically all of Kaiser. So it's Northern California, Southern California, Hawaii, Oregon, a couple of places in the East Coast. And so it was my first taste into billions and billions of records of data. So I was able to also think about the concept of ETL, which is something very familiar to us in Odyssey. That was the first place I got a taste of how to do that, because some members also did receive care outside of the system. So our group was responsible for collating all of those claims back into the EHR. So the EHR is done by Epic. So again, another taste and flavor of really learning about how those data system works. SQL was something that I first got a good taste of while I was at Kaiser, although I knew a little bit through the biostats program. I started to develop those skills. Most of the places that I worked at early on there were SaaS shops. So that was, again, a place where I really developed my SaaS skills.
Mhm.
From there, I also pepper in some personal stories from there. I got married, moved to the East Coast, and then ended up working for Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield here in New Jersey. So that was a very similar experience to where I was at Kaiser, again on a smaller scale. Um, they gave me an opportunity to think about some newer programs. They had a distinct research arm that they were trying to help members in the system avoid costs by creating what they call an ACO, or a patient provider network. And so our job there was to think about how to run some standardized analytics, lots of utilization metrics on how people were receiving their care, and what was happening. So up until this point, my journey had really been all about looking at the data that people feed into from insurance claims and EHR systems. From there, Patrick had this opportunity at Janssen, and I interviewed and I got the position. At that time, Patrick's team was Patrick and Eric Voss, who many of you probably know, and another colleague. So it was a very, very, very small team. He had just started that team. Walked into Janssen and into the team we have now. There were no ETLs. All we had were raw data for a few of the larger databases that I'm sure many of you have seen in various network studies, or during the symposium, some of the data that was shared. So my first part of the journey there was to think about how to get the data we had in Janssen into the Common Data Model 2.0. So we had very a small infrastructure. We were a small team, and most of us were fairly new with Odyssey and the OMOP Common Data Model. So that was, again, my first taste of learning how to use the CDM. And I did the Premier CDM for us, so published a paper on that. If folks are interested in learning. And at that time, all of us that were there as a part of the group started off by really supporting that piece of the journey, which is the CDM and getting our data up to speed. From there, I was encouraged to think about a PhD. And at my time in my master's program, there were a few people that were doing a PhD at the old UMDNJ, which is now Rutgers. So I enrolled myself in the bioinformatics program there, thinking I would, take a few classes, see how it goes. Up until this point, I was not trained epidemiologist by any way, shape, or form. This was something that I found very, very interesting, and wanted to learn more about. So with, of course, the support of Patrick, I got into the PhD program, started taking some classes, started again thinking about research a lot more than I was before. Um, and part-time also working and being a part of the PhD program, while I still, again, developed some more skills in epi. So as we embarked on the journey of getting our ETLs up to speed, we started in this department really thinking about the infrastructure that we have at Janssen, the tools that we have. So many of you know the tools that we know now, like Atlas and Achilles and all of the Hades packages. They were non-existent at that time. So I had the opportunity to think about how we use those tools and how we grow those tools to be what they are today. So that was a very great experience. While technically I wasn't, someone who could pull all the bells and whistles to get Atlas up and running. I knew from the user perspective what I'd really like to see those tools do for us
Mhm.
as a team and as a community. So the first year I was at Janssen, there was no Odyssey. Um, and the second year I started, Odyssey became a thing, and I joined the journey at that time. And then moving forward in time, I was also given an opportunity here to think about clinical trial data and observational research. So, how can we maximize our clinical trial enrollment by using observational data? So that meant mimicking criteria from clinical trials at various stages, from preclinical all the way to phase 4, to think about enrollment. So we would
Mhm.
take a clinical trial protocol, bake in all of the rules into Atlas, what we know today, and see how many people met that criteria, which criteria really weren't things people were doing in the real world. So I can give a quick example. For example, if we have major depressive disorder as our cohort of people, they would be the cohort we were after. So that's our index criteria. And then we would have various rules like must have failed 2 antidepressants to be eligible for this trial, must not have, any cancers, must not be had an inpatient stay in the last 30 days, or and stack all of those criteria together and really start to think about which criteria interact with each other. So which two or more things are kind of failing this population from moving forward, and provide those insights to these various clinical teams.
Mhm.
So I did that with those across collaboration within the organization with others that are more responsible for trial development and thinking about KOLs and placement of trials with our team. And at that time, that was when Atlas just first started becoming a tool that people were using. I did that for about 4 years. So we ended up being a um, two-person collaboration to move that initiative forward. And we had headcount to increase that to be 2 more people. And it was really interesting and very fruitful exercise, a place where I know mentorship, collaboration, networking. That was where I had the opportunity to really network with lots of folks in the entire organization, meet new people, and think about a really key aspect of, I think, a lot of what we do in Odyssey today is education. So, how are we
Mhm.
educating people about our tools? How are we educating people about data? How to use data in innovative ways? So, that I think was a really great experience for me and a key learning. And that's something I would carry for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
From there, I ended up shifting into more study related work here at Janssen. So thinking about how to do more studies internally to support safety of our products. Our team here is remit is safety, and really shifting gears away from what I would call that phase of innovation, and using our data to kind of think about products or products coming onto the market. Our whole team had focused more on serving the needs of safety. And then as my journey from an early researcher who really didn't know much to where I am today, I ended up taking on leadership roles. So ended up having a direct report to be able to just again grow my capabilities, have that opportunity to mentor somebody else on the team, and also recently had the opportunity to hire interns
Nice.
um, in my position. Sorry, did someone have a
Oh, no,
question?
I said nice.
Yeah. Thank you. And so that was another place where I'm hoping if folks have questions that provide some insight into this very, very intense process. As I've learned, I never had an internship throughout my career, partially probably because I was working the whole time while going through these processes. But I'm hoping if people have questions, I'm happy to support that as well. Well, one thing I did leave out in my journey was I also became a mom throughout the PhD process. So I started and then did my qualifying and then found out I was going to be a mom, and took a break while I was in the dissertation phase. Started up again with many pushes and prodders and mentorship from others on our team, including Patrick, to go ahead and finish this journey of a PhD, even though it seemed very daunting at the time.
Mhm.
And then became a mom again to another little one, but ended up finishing through that. So that was a very interesting process, and very, very time consuming, very laborious, but again, I think worthwhile at the very end.
Mhm.
So that was something I um, look back on and reflect on as if someone did not push me, if I did not have good mentorship, probably would not have got to that finish line. So, in this group, I think early researchers, people still starting out, one key thing I would take away from my journey up to now is mentorship. If you really have great mentorship, not just people who you report into, but people around you, I think that can be very helpful to your career, thinking about where you want to go. You get all these questions from people about where do you want to be in the next 5 years. It just, I can't even answer that question for you now after 15 years of experience where I want to be in the next 5 years. But having that mentorship around you can really open your eyes to the opportunities that may or may not be available in your purview, and really think about what you want to do next. I'm gonna
Well, I'd
hold
love
it
to dive in
there.
a little and
Yeah,
sort
I
of
was gonna say I'm
ask
gonna
some
hold it there
questions.
and see if people have any questions, because I know I was
Yeah, no,
talking
I
for a
think you
while.
covered like a whole range of things, and you talked about from the start to where you are now. But and I guess going to the beginning, I mean, you talked about how you started out in the Bay Area, and I think a lot of people don't know this about you and I, but we went to the same high school. We grew up in the
We just found
same
this out.
I know, and we grew up in the same town, Fremont. So it's first of all, I just want to say it's like so amazing to see a role model like you from, my where I have started and like where you are now. And another thing I know, so then, you've had this whole journey where you've gone through different organizations and you've learned like so many skills. And I guess one thing I want to ask is looking back now, like what are some skills that you think early stage researchers should start thinking about now, like should start trying to develop now,
Sure. That's a great, great question. So, when I first started out, I'm gonna say this, and I'm not sure that it's the right answer, but there were not a lot of places to find information like we do now.
Mhm,
So there aren't online tutorials about GitHub. There aren't places to, log on with free tutorials about how to program, how to
mhm,
think about data science. Those were things that through my journey, once those items became available, I started doing.
mhm,
So, like other people that I know, family, friends, folks that are still in high school, I still encourage them, when they ask me, how'd you get where you are? What did you do? That's one big place is start to learn some of the technological skills, especially if that's not something that's your trademark
mhm,
now, because there's a lot of free, great places to learn, even in the Odyssey community now. All the tutorials are posted online. Like, I would really spend that time learning that on your own, because I think that that makes a big, big difference in where you're
mhm,
at. So I think there's two aspects. So some people are very technologically advanced, and then they may not be as strong in other areas, such as understanding methods or core epi. So that could be
mhm.
another place to go. So I think wherever you feel like you don't have a strong suit, you should start to think about how to make that piece of you stronger.
Okay. And then I guess, once people have developed those skills or they think that they have like enough knowledge within a certain field to maybe start applying it, what would be your advice on like finding jobs and on finding internship opportunities and maybe like choosing between them? I mean, I wonder if like did you kind of just uh go along with whatever like came to you, or did you actively seek out like certain opportunities? How, what is the looking process? How does that
Yeah.
look like?
I
Yeah.
mean, my, as you call, looking process is a little bit dated compared to what I see now. And I guess I'll give my perspective from when I started out and what I experienced as a hiring manager. Looking at people's resumes, thinking
Right.
about interns. I think that'll also be helpful perspective for those that are actually looking for jobs. So when I was first starting out, obviously the first job, beggars can't be choosers. I was taking anything that came to me. Um, and I ended up in a good spot. I count myself lucky because at least it gave me an opportunity, even though I was in medcoms, it was kind of like a consulting gig,
Right.
to really just get that, open my eyes and see what kind of world is out there, so we can start to think about what it is that I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And then once I got into the biostats program and started meeting more folks there, professors, other people in the program, because it was a working program about where people were working, um, I then really did narrow down into what I was looking for. So, like,
Okay.
I did want to go to a payer system only because that for me was the first tick mark to get access to data and really get my hands dirty with data. And without that, I knew that I would be limited in where I wanted to go.
Mhm.
Because at that point, I knew that I wanted to work in sort of an epi style place, have the opportunity to try to use the biostats degree. But this was the first place I saw in terms of, and I know this is not going to sound greatest, but in terms of looking for a position that I knew would hire me with very limited experience. So that was one key thing also, is to like just think about, places that are going to give you a chance, and then places that are going to give you a chance to grow. That was number two. So right
Mhm.
now at Janssen is definitely a place where I can see growth. I'm not limited to what I'm doing, and I have opportunities to go out. So I think those are the two key things I would look for in terms of what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
And again, starting out, I still will stick with my mantra, whatever you can get, it's an opportunity, and it's what you make of it.
Right.
My first job wasn't so wonderful, but it was an opportunity to at least step back and learn about the space out there.
Yeah.
And then as a hiring manager now, like in very recent times, and someone who's gone through the internship process and having people come on board, um, it's a pretty rough world out there. I think, lots of people, again, with what we have available in terms of technology, the programs that are out there at colleges, people's experience, it's really hard to make yourself sort of stick out because, lots of undergraduates know how to program. Lots of undergraduates have great technical skills, they have great methods capabilities. So it's really difficult to sort of weed out that person. So I do think, trying to get any opportunity you can in your early undergraduate graduate career with an internship is pretty good, because that will get you again the hands dirty, and have that opportunity for you to experience what it's like to work somewhere, again, with
Mhm.
low cost, because you're not tied down to it. It's a short 3-month stint. Um, but it is, I guess the pool is high, as I've experienced with the amount of applicants that apply to internships, and trying to find something that has the mix of what you're looking for. So be it technical, or be it more epi research focused. I
Mhm.
would try to go after the things that you want to, and don't just apply everywhere, because it seemed very evident to me that the people that were just applying to anything, they were going to get weeded out automatically.
Okay.
I think people that are hiring for internships are looking for people, again, with the opportunity to grow. We don't need someone to fill a position. We want to give that opportunity to a person to be able to grow and put something on their resume and say, I did this and I learned this. Not, I've already know all this. And so I
Right.
think that's also a perspective people should keep
Okay.
in their minds.
Yeah, and I think like, you also talked about how you got involved in Odyssey, and a lot of you who started, like, you really didn't know much about what was given to you, but it was just that growth opportunity. And so I guess I'm wondering, um, how has your journey in Odyssey been? Like, can you maybe talk more about people who, like, early researchers who are starting out in Odyssey? Like, what kind of things should they look out for? Or, uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know, just advice on that.
Sure. Yeah. So when Odyssey first started, there were no working groups. There were very limited people with access to data. I remember the first meeting was so small. I think it was at Columbia, not even in a hotel. Um, so I think, seeing the progression of all the information we have now, again, I'll go back to the learning and education. Like there are many tutorials out there that are already public. Um, that's one path. And then the other path, I think, is what all you people are doing now is getting mentored, mentorship, making those connections, networking. I think that's the second piece that makes Odyssey so strong, and that has made me personally a very strong researcher, is having the ability to start to network with people.
Mhm,
Uh, so my participation in Odyssey overall, again, I've submitted posters from the work we've done at Janssen, um, participated in a couple network studies with Pfizer, also participated in the vaccine safety evidence group. So I think participating in the work groups has been something that I'll say is relatively new. It's in the last 5 years was something I did more than before. And I probably can also say that the work groups aren't probably more than 5 years old either, but I think the opportunities there um, are really the diamond, to be able to meet other people, even to just have one-on-one conversations with folks to learn about what they're doing, I think is key to this group here.
mhm,
We have a lot of organizations now in Odyssey, so there's opportunities to think about many different places, many different roles, internships, and just opportunities to shadow and mentorship can also become available. You just kind of have to ask and put yourself out there.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
sometimes
so
that's the
that's
hardest part, but
yeah,
yeah.
that is the hardest part, is to put yourself out there. A personal note, and you can ask anyone who has known me for a long time. I was very shy, very introverted, very much like I didn't know what else was going on, just because I felt like there were many times throughout my career where I didn't feel like I knew where I was going and what exactly I wanted to do and where I
Mhm,
fit in. So that automatically made me not ask and not speak up. But as I became more confident in what I was doing, my skill set, that became a lot easier to do. And I really do encourage you, even though that is the hardest part about get putting yourself out there, is trying to make that connection.
mhm,
You should definitely do so. I feel like everybody that I've met in Odyssey throughout these many years, there's not been one person who hasn't been eager to help anyone, be it experienced or not, in really figuring out either their path or figuring out learning more on a particular subject or an area. I think there's a lot for many people here to learn.
mhm. Well, I guess let's talk about that a little more. So you said that, sometimes you didn't even know what questions to ask. I guess, you know, for individuals who are really, like, not sure what they wanna do, but they, uh, either they wanna try a bunch of different things, or they're just kind of open to a lot of different opportunities, like, what kind of questions should they be asking?
Sure. So I'd say, like, if you are interested in the various spaces that we have in Odyssey, and when I talk about space, I'll say things like data, and then software development. I'm going to lump all those two big thing core ideas together. And then we have the area of methods, and then we have an area of applications.
Uh-huh.
So I would consider myself that person.
The
And that's because
applications?
the application. So
Okay.
like taking the data and doing something with it, for for purposes of generating evidence, right? And disseminating that evidence. And I think if you can try to narrow down what those key things are for yourself that you want to know more about, and really just think about it. I think there are a lot of places where you can sort of have a checklist of, yes, I know what claims are, or EHR are, or registries are, or no, I don't know what that is. And then now let me think about, what I want to know about that. So really just kind of formulating a map for yourself, a roadmap of where you think you want to learn more, where you don't know, I think would be a very good start for folks. And then asking someone to and link up with them to think about who would be the right person.
Okay.
Also, I think for this group, learning about all of the possible industries that are available is also a great place to go. And I know we don't do too much of that in Odyssey, really narrowing down people who are, in pharma or in consulting roles, who are working in academia, who are working for privately funded places or publicly funded, not for profit. These are also all very important aspects of your career that people should think about and consider. Not all parts of pharma are great. Not all parts of academia are great. They may not be right for you. So I also would say that that's something that, as an early researcher, someone who's just starting out, something you take a long look at. That may not become apparent to you right away, because you're still trying to gain lots of experience, but really thinking about where you want to fit in that big world of research, because there's lots of places now to go, um, is I think a crucial step, because then you'll find people who are very like-minded to you, and I think that makes for a great work-life balance.
Mhm.
So, my team at Janssen, I've known for a very, very long time. We all, again, for less intensive purposes, get along with each other. And that is important when you think about your career and long term. You want to be at a place that makes you happy, a place that you feel like you're included, and that you feel like you're making a difference. So these again are also important aspects of your journey. Um, More, I'd say, along the way that you'll develop organically, and as you guys become early researchers to more advanced researchers, your perspective will also change,
Mhm.
um, and the industry from when I first started out to where it is now, completely different. Like if I were to look back and I could laugh at myself about what I didn't know, and what I didn't foresee coming in the future. So
Mhm.
I think that's also another aspect that people um, should keep in the back of their head as they're going through their journey.
Okay. And for students or, early researchers who are interested in epidemiology, can you talk about maybe what your typical workday looks like or what kind of things you do as someone in the epi field?
Sure. So, like I said, I wasn't a trained epidemiologist, so I kind of walked into this with a lot of background learning, I guess. So, a typical day for us, and I'm going to preface this as not just epi, but in industry. Um, so a typical day for us is we are carrying a couple of different projects, which would be studies. So when we think about some of these network studies, that could
Right.
be a study that we would be running. So we would have a protocol. We would have to get the protocol approved through our internal processes. So there's lots of different internal rules and regulations that we have to be aware of and follow. Um, we would be executing those studies.
Mhm.
We would be writing reports. So a lot of the work we do typically is just for internal dissemination. But sometimes we get the opportunity to publish externally. So that would be something we would do. It would be working with our collaborators. So in our team here at Janssen, we have our Observational Health Data Analytics group, which is everybody under Patrick. And we are like the data people who would actually execute the studies. We manage the CDMs here. We do, all the reports. We write our own
Mhm.
papers for the studies that we are collaborating in. And then we also have a group of epidemiologists who are those that are interfacing with our business partners, so working with safety, working with our clinical teams to think about how the data we have can help them answer questions around safety, characterization, natural disease history. Those are some of the high level topics. Um, and then we would work with them to define those questions, to think about what we can and cannot do with the data. So really having this core understanding of data. If someone comes to me and says, I would love to have the BMI of everybody in the data set, and I would have to say, no, not possible, because we only have BMI for 15% of the people. It's self-reported, it's not clean. So these are the kinds of questions we'd be answering and talking to with our epi partners and with those that we're interfacing with in the business, so clinical teams and safety folks as well. Phenotyping is a big part of our group, has always been a big part of a group from the beginning. I feel like we just now gave it that fancy name of phenotype, but really thinking about how to define the population of interest. So how do we define those that have heart failure? How do we do that with our vocabularies? How do we continue to evaluate those people to make sure we actually have the heart failure folks? It's never going to be 100%. And then what kind of trade-offs are we going to live with in our particular study that we're doing? If it's just a characterization or a feasibility, maybe it's okay if we've misclassified 10% or 15% of our population because we just want to understand what we're doing. But if it's for a comparative cohort study and it's an outcome, then maybe we don't want that much of a trade-off there. So these are just some of the things that we do. And these are some of the areas in our team, at least here at Janssen, we focus on in terms of research. So all of us here also carry some sort of research project that we would like to have
Mhm.
and do, along with supporting the business and along with doing OHDSI. That's like another aspect of our work. Um, so that's something we spend, I'd say, about 20% of our time engaging with others in the OHDSI community or amongst ourselves to think about, what other research we can do. So the clinical trial space was an area where I've spent time developing, moving forward, how we do that better as time went on. Fee Evaluator, which hopefully everyone's familiar with, something that Joel Swerdell did in our group. That was his little pet research project that turned into something really incredible for everyone to use here. So there's many areas where we have done even little research. We published a paper here and there on a phenotype, published
Cool.
a paper on the phenotyping process, or thinking about how to do that in our data. That also is a part of what we do here.
And Rupa, I've had the privilege of being in the vaccine evidence working group alongside you, and you actually have done a network study on phenotype comparison. Is that right?
Yep. So we
Okay,
were
so
in.
maybe, yeah, so can you maybe talk about what that experience has been like? And I actually know a couple people on the call who have been talking about maybe doing their own network studies at some point. And so, what is your advice on that? Like on people who want to lead their own network study?
So I'll have a little bit of a biased experience there. So the network study involvement I've had a few. That's I guess my most recent was to think about phenotype, how to compare different phenotypes and their impact on the background rates that they have. So as part of the vaccine evidence safety working group, there were a couple of different milestones, and that was one of them, which was phenotyping. And I, in terms of my role in that work and how that began, I think there was a clear objective for that working
Okay.
group to develop a core set of papers around various topics. So I would say that was easier to get off the ground, where as we all worked together, we knew what the end result was going to be. We knew that there was a need in this space, and so we were able to put together the packages and disseminate that to those that are working with us in the network studies. Um, as part of the Women of OHDSI working group, we also did a network study on breast cancer. It was a prediction model, and that one was a little bit harder. So my experience there was that there were folks that were interested, um, but harder to get that one off the ground, even though we had packages, we had cohorts, we had everything ready to distribute out to folks. That was harder to get the data to come back, um, and to really have sort of cohesive result set. So like, from those two different experiences, I'd say in network studies, the hardest thing is trying to get that protocol um, finalized and really think about what our question is. That's still, even as a researcher of 15 years, experience is a very hard thing to do. So I'd really say that you probably spend most of your time thinking about your protocol and the question that you're trying to answer. And then getting partners to come up with data, I think is probably the next integral step is to find the right data partners. And this is where um, early researchers, you have to kind of go out and put your hand out there and shake hands with folks and see if they're interested in participating. At Janssen, we have a lot of uh, low roadblocks that we have to go through in terms of what we can and cannot participate in. So I know there's many institutions that would have to go through that. So thinking about those kinds of things would be beneficial. And the other thing I will say is something that Patrick said to me long, long ago, which I never really thought much about until now, is we really don't have a lot of good data on characterizations, on natural disease history with real world data. So like that's still a need. If you
Mhm.
go look out there in the real world, we don't really have that for a lot of niche diseases. Um, for subpopulations, I know there's a working group on health equity. So
Oh,
I think those kinds of places are great places to think about network studies because they're tangible, they could fit an unmet need quickly, and then they won't be as complex and I guess riddled with lots of extra things to consider when we think about cohort studies. I think that they can become a little bit more daunting, especially if that's something you're just starting out with, as well as prediction also can sometimes be a little bit more consuming when we think about how we use those results. Whereas, characterizations are a good place to say, hey, here's the population of heart failure, for example, out in the real world. And that can be a great place to start.
yes. Great. Thank you. So, I guess before I turn it over to people in the audience to ask questions, I just want to ask you um, if you know if there are positions open at Janssen or, for earlier researchers who might be looking for internships or whether, your company's hiring, I guess, how can people apply? Or yeah, do you have anything to say
Sure. We
about
don't
that?
have any open positions currently. But for the last 2 years, we've had internships. So I definitely encourage folks to, when that announcement goes out, I cannot say with 100% certainty that it is going to happen this year, but we are still talking about doing it again. That folks in this group apply and then reach out to us folks at Janssen to be able to make sure that we did receive their application and go through the process. Janssen and Johnson and Johnson in general has a very robust internship program. So they have a lot of generalized internships, which don't focus particularly in epi or one particular skill, but can give you, again, a broad stroke of all the different functions and looking for skill sets in this area. So people with science degrees, third years for undergraduate, first or second years for master's degree candidates, and then first, second, third, fourth years for PhD programs. Janssen also offers quite a bit of postdoc positions in many different functions, not including epidemiology when available. And they also offer co-ops in other functions in R&D as well. So that's like going to school and working at the same time. It's reduced hours. Um, so I would definitely think about scouring the Johnson and Johnson website. Actually, now is the perfect time. Internships will start to go up late December. Typically, they are making hiring decisions by late February, early March. Um, narrowing down their pool, and people are in internships in May, late May, as soon as school gets out, depending on what school you go to, and that will go all the way until the beginning of September for folks that can stay on for that long. So they are flexible, they are broad, they are very diverse. So this is the perfect time to be hunting for internships. I'd say not just for Janssen, but all of pharma, because they typically want to get them out early in the year and then get people in those spots by the end of first quarter.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to take a pause and open it up to anyone who has questions. So you can just feel free to unmute or put it in the chat.
So I can't see the chat, Faiza, so you'll have to.
Okay, that's fine. I know Paul has raised his hand.
Yeah, Rupa, thank you so much. That was such a great background and overview. It's great that you've mixed informatics and in the field of analytics. And you also talk about how you stay up to date with a lot of online learning. Was there any gaps you had to fill that you didn't get in traditional education? You know, was there a class missing, whether it was SQL or machine learning? I'm trying to think, what sort of thing would you like to see today in today's curriculum that could prepare people for working within OHDSI?
Oh, I would say application. So
Application.
yeah, so a lot of application courses, although my program focused, the 2-year program focused, first year was all theory. So derive a Z-score from, by hand. And the second part of the curriculum was SAS. Again, sounds very dated, and it is. So I think being
No,
able to apply
they
your knowledge.
they still teach SAS in our courses here as well as other places, unfortunately. So what you're saying is mostly hands-on data science, get people into the data as quickly as possible so that they can begin to start trying to think through. So you can't really develop the data science skills without having access to the data.
That's correct. And I think being able to use the data, it could be even for all intents and purposes, a dinky data set, but actually knowing how to use that data, how to think about things like missing data, imputing data, all of these concepts I think are very important, and was something that I learned more of along the way in my journey rather than in traditional school. So there, you have your one right answer that appears on the test. Here in the real world, there is no right answer for you to look up, So I think having the ability to be okay with that, even I'd say like as master's program theses or projects, I think would be a big gap that would, I think, help a lot of students, help a lot of people starting out really feel comfortable with the fact that there is not going to be a right answer that will come flying out to you, and that the real world is quite complex.
Thank you.
Other questions? I know you did a really thorough job, Rupa, of going through everything.
Thank you.
I can jump in if no one else wants to. So what I picked up, Rupa, you talked about a lot of things that you didn't have when you started your career, but I was wondering if what from your education or the experience that you had in the early stages, do you think that you still use today, or that you're really grateful that you got to sort of learn these things or these processes? Just something where you think, oh, it was really great that I had this when I came in, and then that allowed me to then explore into all these new areas.
Yeah. Yeah, so I really was grateful early on that I had the perspective of kind of where I wanted to go. So working with data. So I knew that early on, so that I could start to, again, hone in on the areas where I wanted to go, right? So after the first job, I realized that, oh no, I need to really think about how to use this data. So that was one. And then going back to Paul's point about going to school. So I think both with my master's and with the PhD, um, knowing what I wanted to grow into and grow out of was also a key to to where I am now. So I'd say less about the technical skills, because I learned that as I was moving through positions, adapting to whatever I needed. So be it SAS, SQL, R, which I learned here at Janssen, after we all decided to move into that space. So I think that was another key place, is just having that perspective of what I wanted to learn. Um, and it's hindsight. When I was going through my formal education, I was like, when am I ever going to use this? But now, I think looking back, it really does build those foundational skills. Yes, I learned SAS first, but it helped me learn SQL. And then SAS and SQL helped me learn R, even though I, didn't come from a very, very technical background. I was able to apply all of those skills. So, I think being grateful for the building blocks, and the building blocks, they rest on some of these theoretical knowledge, at least learning one of the computer languages, and then being able to build from there. So, yeah, and I think sticking through it. So had I stopped and said, oh, I don't think this is useful, and, kind of shut the door, I probably would have lost out on some of the learning there. So just kind of sticking through it is also something I think I'm grateful that I did starting out.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting and fantastic point you make, of having that flexibility, sort of, and also having the willingness to sort of try something that maybe you don't know, or maybe you aren't good at, or maybe you aren't experienced at, with the understanding of, things aren't always going to go perfectly in the first case, but at least you'll learn something by doing it. And I think hearing you talk about having this sort of negative experience in the first instance with a job, it's still what I hear is that you still learn from that. Okay, so I need to be a little bit more careful about where I go to, what I apply for. But I've ruled something out, and I think sometimes it can be a little bit underestimated how useful it is to just rule out something and say, hey, I don't want to do this. Can be in the process of development. So it's really interesting to hear that from you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I'll go back to my point about thinking about where you want to be and the place you want to be in, when we think about sectors like academia, pharma, private, nonprofit. So, you may or may not even know you want to be there until you try something else and realize either that is for you or that's not for you. So I think it's a don't be shy, take a chance, especially I think now, with the dynamic changes in the job market and how the world is working outside of us. It's, if you have an opportunity, it's an opportunity to learn, and you should try and think about it that way.
I think that's a great point to end on, unless, I guess, if folks have more questions, Rupa, how can they contact you?
Sure. So I think my bio and contact information is posted on the OHDSI website. So please feel free to reach out to me there. I'm on the chat, and I'm on the forums, so, and in GitHub. So please just look me up. I am pretty sure I'm the only Rupa Makadia in OHDSI. So you shouldn't have any trouble finding me. And then Faiza, if you wanted to, you can feel free to circulate my email.
Okay. I'll do that
to the group.
Definitely. Thank you
Apologies,
so
I
much.
don't have access to the chat, otherwise I would be able to just put it in there.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely circulate it and make sure that people have that information if they have questions for you. But thank you so much for taking the time. And I think this has just been such an informative session for people, just about finding jobs, being open to opportunities, and your whole career journey. I'm sure people will resonate with some aspect of that. So I really appreciate that you took the time.
Thank you so much. And yes, anyone in this group or anyone else that I'm more than happy to provide any guidance, help, mentorship that I can. Very, very grateful for all that, all the mentorship I received through OHDSI and through my peers and through mentorship, that I'm very grateful to be able to pass it on.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Well, have a great day. And thank you again for having me here.
All right. Thank you, Rupa. Later.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.